Well, welcome to Chapter 1, Part 2, where we're going to continue on with our slides. We're going to continue with talking about what type of variables can we have. Well, you can have qualitative data variables or quantitative variables. Categorical or qualitative data, what are those? Those are variables whose values are attributes or characteristic. It allows researchers to categorize the individual. Now, what about quantitative variables? They're variables whose values are numerical measures, that arithmetic operations have meaning for them. It allows the researcher to summarize via averages. So, with quantitative variables, that is the numerical measures, we have two different types of quantitative variables. We have discrete and continuous. So what's a discrete variable? It's a variable that has a finite or accountable number of possibilities. Often these variables are counts. So something like how many seats are in a theater, where you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you can actually take your finger and point it and count. Continuous variables are variables that have an infinite, not accountable number of possibilities. These variables are often measurements. So anything that you can take a ruler to, put it on a scale, put it in a measuring cup, looking at a timer or a clock. These are continuous variables in general. So here we go with our variables. You can either have categorical or quantitative. With the quantitative variable, you either have discrete or continuous. Discrete being counts, and continuous meaning you have an infinite number of possible values. So those are generally measurements. So let's say, if I said, how many people, color of your shirt, rather, that would be a categorical or a qualitative variable. You could have red, blue, green, yellow, orange shirts or something like that. Those would be categorical. Also, if I said something like zip code, that, even though it's numbers, is not quantitative, because if I took a zip code and added another one, it doesn't have a meaning, or multiplying two of them. That doesn't mean anything. So a zip code tells you what area you live in. So that's a categorical data or qualitative. Area code, again, even though it's a number, would be categorical. Even a jersey number on a player's shirt is categorical. Now quantitative, let's look at quantitative and discrete variables. That would be things like the number of seats in the theater. It would be the number of cars in a parking lot. The number of people who go and take the first train into D.C. Now, what's a continuous variable? The heights of individuals, the weight of individuals. Those would all be considered continuous, quantitative, continuous variables. So those are just some examples. So what do you do with those variables? Well, we can do what's called some descriptive statistics. After we collect the raw data from a sample survey or a designed experiment, we can describe the data using visual methods. That's graphical displays. That's Chapter 1. To describe the data using numerical methods, that's what we're going to learn in Chapter 2. Different methods are appropriate for different types of data. So descriptive statistics, it's statements about the sample. So the focus is on interpreting and presenting the data that has been collected by a sample. Now, no attempt is made to generalize to other, that's larger groups, such as the population. So it strictly is just the sample and what the sample gave. So let's look at some more examples. The effects of hypnosis on the immune system. The objective of this particular study was to determine if hypnosis strengthens the disease-fighting capacity of immune cells. So this is what they did. They had 65 college students. They categorized these 65 college students. They said 33 were easily hypnotized and 32 were not easily hypnotized. Another thing that they looked at was the white blood cell counts that were measured. All the students viewed a brief video about the immune system. Students randomly assigned to one of these three conditions. Some of the subjects were hypnotized and given mental exercise. Another set of students were subjects were relaxed in a sensory deprivation tank, and another set of students were the control group, where no treatment was done whatsoever. Now, the white blood cell counts were remeasured after 1 week. The two white blood cell counts are compared for each group, the before and the after, and then the results were taken. And the results ended up being that the hypnotized group showed larger jumps in white blood cells. The easily hypnotized group showed the largest immune enhancement. So let's look, what were the variables measured? Well, some of them were categorical and some were quantitative. What were the categorical variables? Well, whether or not they were easy or difficult to achieve hypnotic trance. That was categorical. That wasn't there was no numerical information there. And the group assignment was also categorical. Now, what was the quantitative variable? Well, that was the number of blood cell counts. So we had the pre-study white blood cell count and the post-study white blood cell count. Case study number 2. Let's look at this and look at the variables and how the actual test was run. Let's look at this other case study. Weight gain spells heart risk for women, and the objective of this particular study was to recommend a range of body mass index in terms of coronary heart disease risk in women. The study started in 1976 with 115,818 women, aged 30 to 55 years without a history of coronary heart disease. Each woman's weight was determined, and each woman was asked her weight at age 18. Other questions were asked whether or not they were smokers or non-smokers, and if there was any history of coronary heart disease in their family. Now, this cohort of women were studied over 14 years, and after the end of the 14 years, the number of coronary heart disease, or fatal and non-fatal cases, were counted. The variables measured, the quantitative variables, were the age, the weight, and the weight at age 18. Now, age is a discrete variable, and the weight was continuous because it's a measurement. The categorical data that was collected in this study was the incidence of coronary heart disease, whether they were a smoker or non-smoker, and a family history of heart disease. Now, when we get this data, we can find out the distribution of the data, and that tells us what values a variable takes on and how often it takes on these variables. So that's what a distribution gives us. And we can get there. It can be a table, a graph, or a function. So some ways of displaying distributions: if we have a categorical variable, then pie charts and bar graphs are good for displaying that information. For quantitative variables, we do histograms, stem plots, box plots. There's a bunch of those. Now, these are the ones that we'll study in this chapter.